Hey guys, it's Charlie subbing in for TheTopher to bring you a familiar chime with an unfamiliar steering wheel badge in front of us. This is the 2024 Honda Prologue, and I'm out here with Tom of Tedward.
Hey guys.
And we've been driving this around some of the beautiful wine country up here in Northern California. Today is going to be an opportunity for us to tell you a little bit about the car, some raw first impressions. Of course, TheTopher will have this car back in his home state to give you a full week-long impression of it at some point here. But let's hop out and take a look at what Honda's giving us here for their first mass market production electric vehicle. Of course, Honda has had some foray into electric vehicles before. They had a Fit EV, we've had a Clarity EV, but this is something for the masses. This is about the total size of a Honda Passport when we're talking about length and width, but obviously a good bit lower. It's powered by an 85 kilowatt hour battery pack and either front or all-wheel drive, either a single motor or dual motor setup here. This one giving us 288 horsepower and 333 pound-feet of torque in this all-wheel drive Elite trim. So it's in line. A lot of the specs are in line with what you might be getting from sort of these mid-size crossover electric vehicles on the marketplace here in the beginning of 2024. But some of you more keen in the know sort of viewers are going to know that this is a vehicle that's shared with General Motors. General Motors and Honda teamed up so that Honda was no longer late to the EV ball. They have a player now here in this Honda Prologue, and it shares a lot of DNA with the Chevy Blazer, not only the battery pack and a lot of the engineering underneath, but as we'll see as we poke around the vehicle, and we already saw from the startup, a lot of interior bits as well. Honda claims to have engineered their own DNA into the steering and driving experience, but we'll talk about that a little bit as we're rolling. You get a power opening hatch here in the upper two trim levels, this Elite as well as the Touring right below us. I'm seeing a really low, nice smooth, flat load surface here if you're getting things in and out of the vehicle. Because this is only a two-row vehicle, they've really expanded the length space of what you get both in the cargo area and the second row, as we'll see here in a moment. A little bit of underfloor storage as well here. We see little Altium badging right there. There's also a subwoofer buried in here for this Bose 12-speaker audio system. Fun little fact. If you want to fold down the seats, ooh, look at that, spring-loaded. So that goes flat. Tom is checking to see what I've squished. Oh boy. And it doesn't look like he's able to. That
is heavy. Oh my
it's spring-loaded. Yeah, it's right, remarkable.
Well, let's hope my GoPro thing is.
Well, if a GoPro gets crushed by that seat, then I'd be really disappointed in where GoPro's quality is gone. We've got that 60-40 split, as you can see, and there's definitely not going to be a way for me to bring that seat back up from here, so I am going to close the rear hatch, come on up to the back row. You can see I could go for a little bit more door width opening if you're trying to get child seats in or out of there, but overall as a family vehicle, I think it'll do quite okay. Latch that back, and you can see acres of room. Getting in here, I've got quite a lot of lean back, but my POV head is hitting the ceiling a little bit. I think if I were taller than a 5'10" person, it'd be a little bit tough back here.
I'm just simulating the family life while I'm eating.
Yeah. Tom has already gotten pistachios all over the car. He tried to eat beef jerky. He's really trying to season the Prologue here.
I have dropped nary a crumb in this car.
This is going to be important for a lot of family buyers. Air vents back here. So if you do have, whether it be younger passengers back here or adults riding along, they're going to be cooled. And we've got two USB-C ports for power back there, as well as pretty conventional wall-style outlet there. That's going to be convenient. Maybe if you pick up a Honda Moto Compacto from your dealer, you can charge it up using that port. Some people are concerned about rear door panels, and you still get a pretty cohesive design language back here. I like to see that. I like to still see some of this Elite tan color coming through. A flip-down armrest that's giving us some grip. Overall, if I had to ride back here for some of the 270 some miles of range that this car provides, I think I'd be quite all right, especially with this panoramic roof letting in some rain for us. Let's take a quick look under the hood. Double pull. You know, more brands are doing that now. That was a BMW thing for so long.
Well, I say this with my mouth full, but good for you, BMW.
Here's your charge port. This vehicle is capable of up to 150 kilowatt charging speed, so a little bit slower than some of the competition. However, what's really going to be important is seeing what the real world charging curve is like. For those of you who are really in the EV know, you'll know that 150 kilowatts is the maximum theoretical charging speed, but as you get to different charge levels, it's going to change. So we're going to have to wait to see the car in the real world. Honda claims that you'll be able to get from 20 to 80% charge in 35 minutes, for whatever that's worth. That's what you get up here. This is pretty standard under the hood sort of situation. No sort of frunk, and maybe a little bit of empty space right there. So a little bit surprised to see that, but double hood struts. So nice solid close there. What do y'all think of the looks? I think it's attractive. I think it looks nice. The wheels are kind of fun, a little bit of Honda liveliness and DNA there. You can certainly see inspiration of design language from other Honda vehicles, but yet still gets its own styling as well. And I failed to point out the beginning, but we don't have a traditional Honda badge on the back. We have this spelled out Honda name in kind of a fun spaced out font. Coming into the driver's seat is where we really start to see some of the GM DNA from a visual and tactile perspective. Closing the door, let's turn this off here for a moment. We're seeing familiar General Motors steering wheel. We're seeing physical controls for the HVAC, very similar to what we'd see in a General Motors product. We're seeing a standard touchscreen here up on top of the dash, giving us an Android Automotive-based infotainment system that provides wireless CarPlay and Android Auto support, which we can see right in there. We've got wireless device charging that has been working pretty well, charging both iPhone 15 and Pixel 8 Pro right in there, no problem. Large cup holders, and what I actually really like to see, a very grippy center console area that you can put stuff. And stuff is important to be able to put places when you're riding around with passengers. So far this trip, Tom and I have had food, we've had cameras, we've had drinks, we've had phones, and never once have I been searching for a place to put stuff. And that's really, really important to me. For power points, you get two USB-Cs that both support data there. So if you got USB-A drives, be sure to carry yourself an adapter. And then in front of us, we're seeing a head-up display up on the rainy windshield, as well as a screen right in front of us that is giving us a little bit of that conflict between a round steering wheel and a square screen. But for the most part, I haven't had any trouble seeing it throughout the day. But again, a lot of shared switch gear. Not all of it for the bad. It's just, we're going to talk about this a little bit more throughout the drive. It's different than you would expect from being in a Honda. That's just the main rub, is that this is a nice car. This has been a good car to be in. It's just different. It just might not be what you're expecting. And I think we kind of saw that a little bit with Toyota in the BZ4X as well, in that a lot of people wanted an electric Toyota, and then they got it, and it just wasn't the car they were really expecting. And I think some Honda shoppers might be experiencing that with this Prologue as well. A lot of Honda people wanted an electric vehicle. Honda's given them an electric vehicle, and it's just maybe not exactly what they were expecting to get. But everybody's got to start somewhere, and Honda has made it very clear that they're putting a lot of effort into becoming a zero carbon emission sort of company in the future and having many, many more EV and hydrogen products out on the market. They've put huge amounts of money into their battery development centers around the country, and there's more to come from Honda. So this is just, this is the product we're driving here today. So let's use this column shifter right here and go out and drive it. Some of you TOPher fans might be curious if you can fully defeat the traction and stability control and spin it around like you can in a Hyundai product, and I will demonstrate to you here. Holding does nothing, but a tap will turn off traction control. We've got all-wheel drive in this model. I don't want to clip any of these little plastic bits. I'm going to be... No, it simply goes forward, which admittedly for most buyers of this car, I think that's gonna be what they want. They just want to go forward. But for some of you more diehard TOPher fans, you might be a little disappointed to know that when Chris gets this car back in Michigan in the snow, he won't be ripping donuts.
Maybe there's a secret pedal dance.
You're right, he is the king of pedal dances. He loves those. We're going to start with a little bit more of backcountry driving here and then progress into some highway. Let's see what we got out on some of these roads. Even though it's been a little bit rainy today, we got the opportunity to get the Prologue out here on a little bit more of a scenic, twisty road route. And if you're doing a route like that, you do have this sport mode button down here on the left. You get a little indication down in the instrument cluster that you're in the sportier driving mode. Doesn't do too much to the car other than weight the steering a little bit more, give it a little bit more of that, what they're going to try to call feedback into the steering system. You also get a little bit more artificial noise pumped in there. So as we navigate some of these roads here with a little bit of corners, we're going to see what this powertrain gives us. So right now, foot to the floor. Despite this being the torquiest product that we can think of that Honda's ever produced, it's not exactly a ripper, but for a family SUV, it's going to be more than you're used to getting out of something like your Passport or Pilot, that 3.5 liter naturally aspirated motor that has to rev up. Instead, you simply have the power when you want to use it. We have a few different gauge cluster screen options in front of us. As you can see, we've got a little bit of a map showing up right now, giving us our navigation, and that is the same navigation that we're getting out of my Android Auto or Apple CarPlay in the center screen. It's nice to see it in both, but if I press this bottom right button on the steering wheel, now I have a little bit more of a driver information screen showing me what my following distance is for the adaptive cruise control. If I press one more time, getting a little bit more of what you might consider to be a traditional gauge cluster screen. Big digital speed readout in the center, my charge level percentage over on the left side of that circle, and on the right a little bit of a power screen. I will admit it's a bit of information overload in front of you. I'm seeing navigation, I'm seeing clock, I'm seeing gear, I'm seeing kilowatts, I'm seeing power, I'm seeing charge level in 2 different readouts. So there is a lot going on there, but if you simply look out in front of you, you see more information because there is a head-up display that's showing me my speed, the speed limit, what my cruise control is set at, what my navigation's got going on, and a clock. But let's give it a little bit of juice. Much like something like a Ford Mustang Mach-E, we're feeling the power really fall off above maybe about 60 miles per hour or so. Let's slow down to maybe 50 and then I hit it. A little bit of yank, but again, not really much there. It's a subdued driving experience. It really weights down the steering in sport mode. If I go back, compare it. Yeah, this feels a little bit more light and natural. Because you all are going to want to see it. Let's come to a stop. The brakes do feel good. They feel natural for an EV. Sport mode. There's that initial yank, as we often get with electric vehicles. And then, yeah, right about 45 miles per hour, you feel kind of your body relax more to a natural state. Two different one-pedal driving. Actually, I should technically say 3 different options for one-pedal driving. You can either have it off, a normal mode, or a high, where the vehicle really provides a lot of stopping force when you release the accelerator pedal. So right now, my foot's off the gas, and I'm getting over 100 kilowatts of regen. So that's really strong. That's going to get you a lot of energy back into your battery. And it does make it so that even in some of these twistier sections, really don't have to use the brake pedal. Despite this being such a shared architecture and vehicle with GM, Honda engineers have had the opportunity to inject some of their driving DNA into the chassis tuning, into the steering. Admittedly, Tom and I have talked about it back and forth. We're not fully convinced that this feels like a Honda product out on these type of roads. I believe that the Honda engineers did get to have their say, and I do believe that if we were driving this back and forth with a Blazer EV, we would rather be in the Honda. But I'm trying to do TheTopher justice in being a Honda owner, and I can't help but think if he had the option to drive this or his Civic Type R, he'd probably pick the Civic Type R on most of these driving situations. It's just not really replicating the driving experience of what we know and love from Honda vehicles.
And that's true for even the lower versions of the cars. Like, I think the HR-V, while a lot of people will say, oh, it's underpowered, or maybe they don't love the CVT, I think the chassis is phenomenal. I think it's a fun thing to flog around. It's kind of a laugh. I'm I'm not quite getting that from this.
I fully agree. Honda is a brand that, at the end of the day, is run by engineers and employs a lot of vehicle designers and engineers who worked in racing. And that's why when you get behind the wheel of essentially any Honda product, like Tom just pointed out, it's hard to enunciate, but you feel the racing DNA in the chassis tuning, it's really, really subtle things that oftentimes you can't even see on paper, but you can make very subtle adjustments in a vehicle's architecture and chassis design and tuning that have large impacts on how the vehicle feels on the road. And it takes a really skilled chassis designer and engineer to be able to tell you what those differences are. And Honda, being a company that has a DNA in racing, often engineers, even their most mundane family haulers, they engineer a spirit of that racing DNA into all the cars they design. And that is where you feel the difference between this being a car that wasn't designed from the ground up as a Honda compared to something that was designed from the ground up as a Honda. And that's not to say that this isn't a pleasant vehicle to be in. Tom and I have spent many, many hours sitting in the seat so far today, and we're comfortable, we felt safe. A lot of the controls are very easy to figure out. We have a lot of physical controls up here in front of us. I don't think anything has really frustrated me about this car. We've really settled in there. Like, I mean, if we're getting into nitpicky ergonomics, maybe just things like these cup holders are very large and a smaller bottle doesn't really get held in there very well. You can sort of put in your own subjective interpretation on these large swaths of plastic. But from a driving perspective and from an ownership sort of perspective, it's very competent. It's very straightforward. There's nothing egregious or wrong about this car, but it's a very good family hauler as an American vehicle.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a Honda product. And I feel like that's important for you all to know. I'm sorry if that's something that you might not agree with or you might interpret differently, but Honda is one of those brands that a lot of Honda owners want to own a Honda. There's not really anything else like it on the market, and there's a reason why they have started out with a Civic and then they moved to an Accord, and they owned 4 Accords in 40 years because they've lasted them so long, and then they have a family and they upgrade to an Odyssey or a Pilot or a Ridgeline or something like that. They want that Honda DNA into everything they touch, feel, and experience from behind the wheel. So I've got to be honest with you that this doesn't feel like a Honda vehicle from behind the wheel. Is that fair? You think Chris would be okay with that?
I think that's fine. And you can always not put it in if you don't. It's fine.
Yeah. I've really appreciated from behind the wheel here, the very thick steering wheel, I should point out, that the green space inside this car has been fantastic. The greenhouse, I should say. It's a lot of visibility. We have a long IP in front of us, giving me sweeping views of everything in front. Admittedly, from behind, I could see where the inclusion of General Motors camera rearview mirror would have been nice, because it's not the largest rearview mirror. One of the benefits of our POV shooting style is you can see right here that we've got this little tiny windshield wiper in the back there, cleaning off a little section of window. And my C and D pillars are particularly large. If I were merging right now, we'll be driving on the highway a little bit later, there's a good amount of blind spot back there. Fortunately, these mirrors are large, you've got blind spot monitoring, and of course Honda's dedication to safety. They're giving you a swath of active and passive safety features from the basic EX model. You don't have to step up to this elite model to get all of the safety features. In fact, I think there's only 2. One of them is the surround view camera, the 360 camera, and there's one other safety feature that you get with this elite trim. I don't even know if you remember, but it's something like subtle, something that's not going to be detrimental if you don't have.
The positive on that, though, is the fact that, like, in the base trims you get a lot. I mean, there's
pedestrian detection, automatic emergency braking, front and rear cross traffic alert, all those big time safety sort of features are going to be there.
Honda prides themselves that they don't utilize their safety features as exclusive to higher trim levels.
Yes.
They want that to be ubiquitous, so that way there's safety across all their lines, because they're also committed to 0 traffic fatalities in their cars by 2050, I think. They have these safety goals, so they do inject all of those safety things into the cars.
Right. Honda's giving you a pretty straightforward trim walk, and that's something I've always really appreciated about Hondas is their trim structures are pretty simple. There's not a lot of confusing packages in there. So essentially the Prologue starts in the upper $40,000 range with a front-wheel drive EX model. You spend a few $1,000s extra and you're getting an all-wheel drive EX model. Step up a little bit more and you're getting the touring trim, and that to me is where the sweet spot is, because you're getting the Bose sound system. That's something really important. If you're spending this type of money, do yourself a favor, ignore the EX, get yourself this fairly decent Bose sound system, because I have to imagine the 6-speaker in the basic car is nothing to write home about. So that touring trim is giving you a lot of the nice to have features that you're going to feel like you ought to be getting in a $50,000 car. If you step all the way up to this Elite trim here, you're getting the option of this cool tan leather interior, these bits in here. You're getting the ventilated seats, and you're getting 21-inch wheels. But really, I don't see where the value is stepping up to the Elite trim. I think the touring model is going to give you everything you want. You still have the option of front-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. All-wheel drive is dropping your range down a little bit. You're going to get the most range out of that front-wheel drive model with the smaller wheel package. But fortunately, regardless of the trim you get, even if you stay down at that EX model, like Tom pointed out, you're getting all the safety features, and Honda's not holding back on the tech suite as well. You still get this large infotainment screen that's giving you wireless Apple CarPlay and wireless Android Auto support, something you're not getting in the General Motors products. That was a big thing for people. So you're not feeling like you're really getting the base model if you're stepping down with one of those cheaper trims.
One thing that I'm noticing from the passenger seat is the car feels a little darty, and I drive with Charlie a lot, so I know it's not Charlie. I think there's obviously no play on center, it's direct, but sometimes it feels like, ooh, whoa, we're adjusting, and I think part of that is because you're not getting a ton of feedback from this car, and symptomatic of a lot of EVs, you have instant torque, which means that any motion, and Charlie's foot right now is going to push us forward or backward in our seat. So that combined with the steering, I feel like, is giving me this little bit of a blender as a passenger, and you do have to focus on being like ultimately very, very smooth on the controls in these cars, or else you are going to start to upset kind of the balance of the things and people in the vehicle.
Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because actually, look at the very little input to the steering is giving me a pretty dramatic change in the direction of the vehicle. A lot of cars give you at least a few degrees of steering of kind of a dead zone, so that you're not doing that to your passengers and kind of yanking them around. But this car has a weird balance of a lifeless steering, but also a quick steering. Still in sport mode, apparently. Honda hasn't given us published weight figures for this car, but from Tom's and my best estimate, we're looking at about a 5,400 pound vehicle. And Honda really had to make some suspension decisions when it comes to their tuning, because if you have a heavy vehicle, you're either going to have a big floaty car, or you're going to have a really firm ride to try to keep that all in line and to not feel out of control on some more bumpy and twisty roads. And maybe it's partially these 21-inch wheels. We don't have a ton of sidewall, but I find the ride to be firm. I really do. It's certainly not crashy. We haven't been over anything rough that's sent shivers up our spine, but we're going to be hitting a few rougher sections of road here later on in our drive, and you do feel a lot coming just up into the cabin. It's the rebound damping that's very aggressive. The car doesn't do any float. If you go over a big sort of undulation that moves the whole chassis around, the vehicle does its quickest to get back to a neutral state. And that might be something you appreciate a little bit more in a sports car, something like a Civic, but in a big family hauler like this, I would appreciate having a little bit more float, because realistically, I mean, who's driving these things hard? This is not a car that's enticing you to go do spirited driving.
No, and that's kind of interesting, because even in HRV, which objectively should not be a car that makes me want to drive like a lunatic, that was one of my most entertaining mountain drives of 2022 or whatever. I just said, let's just rip it, and I had a blast, because you get feedback. It's enjoyable to drive. I mean, that's the thing. We like driving. We're drivers. Doesn't mean that I have to be driving a Lamborghini. It's just as long as I get feedback, and that's what Honda gives me. And in this car, just missing a little bit of the connection to the road through the car.
Agreed. Up here at highway speeds, we're in a little bit of a rougher section of highway, and we're kind of getting some of that road intrusion that I was talking about a little earlier, we're getting a bit of a hopping sensation going on.
To be fair, though, this is garbage road.
Yeah.
Like, the road is bad. You're going to feel that. It's, you know.
Yes, but manufacturers don't need to be commended for putting 21-inch wheels on a family hauler.
No.
I mean, really, if we were running on 19s or 18s right now, the sidewall would be doing a lot more to absorb some of this impact harshness. So, yeah, it's by no means, I mean, yes, it is a bad section of road, but we're talking about if you were in a Passport, we'd be essentially not even noticing that this road were rough.
Probably true. And it's interesting to me because one of the, things that you get out of the Elite trim level as a pro is 21-inch wheels. And to me, I'm like, well, I always prefer a little more sidewall.
Mm-hmm.
I know that I'm not the typical customer, and I'm not always who's getting marketed to. But for me, I might prefer to have, the lovely interior, but also a meatier sidewall to absorb some of the unpleasantness.
We know the TheTopher is a big enthusiast of sidewall. We've seen what he's done to his vehicles, so we know that sidewall is important to him. And if it's important to you, fortunately, Honda will give you that touring trim that you're essentially not missing out on anything outside of some fancy bits and some ventilated seats, and you do get more sidewall with it. In fact, we saw, maybe I can drop a little B-roll in right here, the model back at the hotel that has the smaller wheels with the larger sidewall. It looks cool. It looks really good. So that's where I would go. And we mentioned pricing a little bit so far. Obviously, you can look up pricing on your own, but that is another thing you really have to consider with this vehicle is the fact that it's about the same size footprint as a Honda Passport, but coming into cost, you're going to be paying quite a bit more than a Honda Passport. This is the most expensive vehicle that Honda has ever sold here in the United States under the Honda nameplate. And it will be, or at least it should be, eligible for a $7,500 tax credit, depending on your tax bracket, your financial situation. So that will lessen the cost for a lot of buyers. But you do really have to be sobering with yourself and decide, do you really want to step into the electric vehicle lifestyle? Do you want to have this versus something like a Passport or a Pilot that's going to be getting not great fuel economy with its NAV6, but on the flip side, you're going to be able to drive much longer distances and refuel much quicker. So I've got to be honest with you that it's a conversation you need to have with yourself of is this price point right for me for this vehicle? And it's not to say it's really out of line with the competition. A lot of electric vehicles cost around this price point. So I'm not gonna criticize Honda saying they overpriced it or anything like that. But hey, the technology's got to be designed at some point, and this is how much it costs for manufacturers to at least make some semblance of money on some of these vehicles. So for some people, this is going to be a really, really nice car to drive around, and they're going to be willing to pay about $55,000 or so, and then maybe you get some back. Maybe your state gives you a financial incentive to purchase a vehicle. You might be walking out of the dealership with a net cost of something like $35,000, $40,000, and at that point, you're getting a lot of space, you're getting a comfortable ride, you're getting a good sound system, you're getting good technology, and you're getting a car that's going to be backed by a good warranty. So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. Coming into our last stop here in the Prologue, it's a good car. It's a car that provides you transportation and does it very competently. It gives you the safety features, the technology features, the interior accommodations that people are going to want from Honda and they're going to want from this price point. I recommend that if you're in the market, spend some time, head out to a dealership, check one out, and see if it's the right feeling for you. That's a big thing with buying cars is do a test drive, experience it, because again, it's not going to be the experience of a Honda that you might be familiar with. But that's not to say that it's not a nice place to be in here. I will say they really got the accelerator and brake pedal configurations and tuning down really, really well. It's a very smooth progressive throttle, and then as I get back off for the one pedal driving, it slows down nicely. I was hoping to get a chance to wrap it up for you all here, not in the rain, but it doesn't look like we're going to get that luxury. I think of a lot of the enthusiasm we saw when the Civic Hybrid was announced a few weeks ago, and I just don't know if the same level of Honda fan enthusiasm is there for this car, but hey, Honda's got to start somewhere. Everyone's got to start somewhere in terms of getting us into this mixed fuel future, and this is Honda's answer right now. Now, this hasn't been the most ideal situation in terms of range, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of real world sort of efficiency testing that comes out on this car, but Tom and I have been driving for 160 miles, just under. We've been averaging 2.5 miles per kilowatt hour, so fairly accurately, we're looking at only about 50 miles left. And we were doing a good amount of highway. There was rain, we had the heat going, I got heated seat on and everything, but you're looking at a more realistic about 200 miles of range in this sort of driving. So take that as you will. Let's hop out and take one last look at it. We'll actually keep it running here. We'll take a look at those headlights now that it's starting to get a little dark. This Elite trim does give you ambient lighting inside as well, so that's another reason to step up to this model. You get some little bright action there. Ooh, a little blinker action too. Look at Tom knowing what he's doing in there. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll get this car over to Michigan for the TOPher to really put it through its paces. But until then, we'll see you on the next one.